Have you ever had that strange feeling of being watched even though you're completely alone? Heard an unexplained noise in the middle of the night, or caught something out of the corner of your eye only to turn and find nothing there? Yeah, for many, that's just the imagination playing tricks. But for others it's just the beginning of something much bigger. Tonight, we're opening the door to a world where the impossible reveals itself, stories of ghosts, goblins, apparitions, and shape-shifting creatures, beings that defy logic and push the boundaries between the real and the supernatural. From haunted houses to deep forests, from lonely roads to whispers in the dark, every tale you'll hear tonight is based on real experiences. And the scariest part? Many of them happened closer than you'd think. Get ready to dive into a journey where folklore meets mystery, where urban legends blend with everyday life, and where the invisible, sometimes, makes itself terrifyingly visible. But beware, after what you're about to hear, you might never look at your house the same way again. These accounts aren't just spooky stories for fun. They're testimonies from people who experienced something they couldn't explain, encounters with spirits, mischievous goblins, mystical entities, and shape-shifting beings that challenge every rational explanation. And if you think it's all fiction, well, you might be about to change your mind. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and come with us. Because tonight, you're going to hear stories no one would believe unless they happened to you. It doesn't matter if you're in a big city or out in the countryside, everyone knows someone who's had a ghostly experience. It often starts with a simple feeling that someone is there even when you're completely alone. A cold draft in the middle of summer, a door closing with no wind, or footsteps echoing down an empty hallway. What's curious is how these stories repeat across the globe, like some invisible pattern connecting the living and whatever lies beyond. If you've ever spent a night in an old hospital, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Nurses report seeing shadowy figures drifting through silent halls, patients calling out to people long gone, and alarms going off for no reason. Even in ordinary homes or homes that seem ordinary, paranormal events are common. Whispers at night, voices calling names, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. These accounts mess with your mind, enough to make even the biggest skeptic reconsider. One of the most chilling stories I've heard was from a guy who, for weeks, kept waking up at 3:33 a.m. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence. But then he started hearing knocks at his bedroom door, always 3. One night, he finally opened it and saw nothing. But in the mirror behind him, a shadow moved. Since then, he says he constantly feels a presence, like something's following him. These stories carry not just fear, but a certain kind of sorrow, a longing for contact between worlds. Strangely, many encounters aren't threatening at all. Some people report supernatural visits from deceased relatives who seem to only want to say goodbye. A familiar perfume suddenly filling the room, a specific song playing out of nowhere. Some even claim to have received warnings, premonitions through these moments. These stories challenge logic, yes, but they're told with such vivid emotion, it's hard not to believe at least a little. In the end, tales of ghostly entities show us there's far more between heaven and earth than reason can explain. And this is where the mystery settles in. Are these spirits stuck between two worlds? Or are we, sometimes, accidentally stepping across a hidden boundary between the known and the unknown? These questions haunt you, and maybe, just maybe, the answers live in the stillness of the night. It might sound like something out of a fairy tale, but don't be fooled. There are countless real reports of goblins in rural regions, especially in areas surrounded by forests or mountains. They're usually described as small human-like beings with large heads, intense eyes, and a temperament that shifts between playful mischief and pure menace. Some say they live hidden away, in caves or underground holes, and only show themselves when they think no one's watching. In many of these stories, it's children who notice them first. A toy disappears and turns up in a strange spot. High-pitched whispers during the night. Or a feeling that there's a little friend playing, even when the child is alone. One mother said her daughter started talking to herself in the backyard. When asked who she was talking to, the girl answered, "The little green man. He wants me to go with him into the hole on the hill." Sounds like imagination until the adults start noticing things too. Plenty of people have tried to capture these mystical creatures on camera. In some grainy videos, you can spot a small figure darting between trees, or peeking out from behind bushes. What's even more chilling is that, when confronted, these goblins can get aggressive. Some reports speak of unexplainable scratches, things breaking in the middle of the night, or even pets refusing to enter certain areas, as if they sensed something humans couldn't. And don't think these tales are limited to faraway cultures. In southern Brazil, old stories speak of Quiruparas and Capras figures from our own folklore, eerily similar to goblins from Europe and Latin America. In Mexico, they're called Chineques. In Patagonia, forest goblins. No matter the name, the message is the same: they're mystical nature-linked beings that don't like being disturbed. These paranormal encounters push us to rethink the idea that the invisible is just our imagination. Maybe science will one day explain all these sightings. But for now, consider this your warning: if something vanishes in your house without reason, or you hear tiny laughter in the dark, don't ignore it. It might be the wind. Or it might be them watching, waiting, ready to show themselves again. Now we enter even darker territory: shapeshifters, entities with the power to change form. In many cultures around the world, there are legends of beings that can transform into humans, animals, even objects. In indigenous communities, especially across Latin America, they're called Nahualeshamans, or sorcerers who take on the form of jaguars, snakes, or owls to walk among men unnoticed. In the U.S., they're known as skinwalkers, vengeful, malevolent beings with terrifying power. One recurring story comes from Mexican villages, where locals claim they've seen a familiar neighbor turn into a giant black dog during the night. No one dares confront him. And when asked the next day, the man just smiles like he knows more than he lets on. Some families have even abandoned their homes after such encounters, swearing never to return. The fear isn't just the transformation, but that these beings could be walking among us, disguised. A woman once told the story of visiting a remote farm and spotting a wolf-like figure staring at her from a distance. Minutes later, she met an old man with the same eyes and the same scar as the wolf. Coincidence? Maybe. But the following week, she dreamed about the wolf every night and woke up with strange marks on her arms. Stories like that make us ask the question: where do dreams end and the supernatural begin? These tales are ancient, yet still alive today. In Brazil, we have the werewolf, a creature born from the fear of losing our human side to something primal. In Peru and Bolivia, witches are said to turn into birds and fly to secret rituals. Across cultures, these entities symbolize mystery, fear, and respect. Transformation isn't just a physical change, it's a terrifying shift in what we thought was reality. And hey, race the most unsettling thought: if shapeshifters really exist, how do we know we're alone? Who's to say that Shadow on the road was just an animal and not something becoming an animal to escape? On nights like this, these stories remind us that what we see isn't always what we get, and in the supernatural world, appearances can be the most dangerous trap of all. It's always when the stories start to get intense that the audience begins to speak up. And it doesn't take long for that first call to come in, usually with a shaky, hesitant voice: "I've never told anyone this before." But from that moment on, it's like we open a collective door to experiences that have been buried for years. Each testimony comes loaded with emotion and often, It's the first time the person has ever said it out loud. That alone is enough to give anyone chills. One night, an older woman called in to say that, during her childhood, she used to see a figure standing in her doorway, a man in a hat with glowing eyes. The strange part? 3 other people in her family described the same figure at different times in their lives. The audience went wild. People messaged in, saying they'd seen the same thing. And then the big question surfaced: are these ghosts universal entities? Or is it the same supernatural being moving from home to home? Of course, not everyone's a believer. And that's part of the magic of the show. There's always that one skeptic who calls to say it's all explainably optical illusions, overactive imaginations, psychological trauma. But even then, many of these skeptics end up sharing a weird thing that happened one time. And just like that, the believer and the skeptic trade places, and we realize that deep down, no one's completely immune to a good ghost story. In one recent episode, a young man messaged in to say he'd heard strange noises coming from the attic one night. When he went up to check, he found toys from his childhood long gone neatly stacked in a corner, perfectly clean. He swore no one else had access to that space. The story lit up the chat, with people sharing eerily similar experiences. These spontaneous connections show that the unknown doesn't just scare you, it connects us. The audience is the fuel that keeps this journey alive. It's in those live messages, trembling voices, last-minute voicemails, that we feel just how deeply this mystical and haunting world touches people. Even when the microphones go off, the stories keep echoing. Because every listener has their own legend, their own scars. And maybe, their own spirit hiding in the shadows. After so many chilling reports, one question becomes impossible to avoid: what's really behind these stories? Are they genuine supernatural attempts to reach out to us? Or are they simply reflections of our fears, traumas, and collective cultural beliefs? The truth is, no matter how hard we try to stay rational, some experiences simply defy explanation, and that's what makes them so fascinating. It's curious how certain patterns repeat: shadowy figures, mysterious voices, small beings that vanish, strange transformations, and that constant feeling of something being there, even when we can't see it. These stories come from every kind of place: rural, urban, rich, poor. Which makes you wonder, are these phenomena linked to certain locations, or do people carry them wherever they go? Sure, there's always a psychological angle. The human brain is powerful and can generate visions, sounds, and sensations based on stress, memory, or trauma. But how do you explain the multiple witness accounts? Or objects that move in front of a room full of people? And what about children describing entities they've never heard about before? The line between mind and mystery keeps getting thinner. Culturally, these stories serve a deeper purpose. They're passed down from generation to generation, adapted, reshaped, and they become part of the living folklore of each community. From Nawalis to goblins, from vengeful spirits to shapeshifters, these beings speak to how we process the unknown. And more than that, they hint at how much we've yet to discover about reality and about ourselves. So if you've gone through something unexplainably, you're not alone. And more importantly, don't stay silent. Telling your story can ease your fear and help others understand their own strange experiences. Maybe we'll never have final answers. But as long as there are stories to tell, there's a reason to keep exploring the mysteries around us. So, are you ready to share yours? And now, after all these spine-tingling tales, what do you think? Do you believe there are things science still can't explain? Or is it all the human mind trying to make sense of the chaos? Either way, these stories leave a mark of doubt that sits quietly in the back of your mind and just won't go away. What if it's real? Maybe the greatest lesson here is the importance of paying attention to the invisible. Sometimes it's in a whisper, a chill that makes your hair stand on end, or a strange dream that carries a deeper meaning. It's not about having all the answers, it's about being open to feel, to question, and most of all, to respect what we don't understand. And maybe, by doing that, you'll discover something extraordinary about yourself too. Now ask yourself, what stories does your family keep buried? What have you experienced that you chose to forget? And what if the next appearance isn't in your neighbor's house but in yours? The question might be uncomfortable, but that's exactly what drives us to dig deeper, to explore, and to embrace a world where the impossible might just be waiting for the right moment. If these stories moved you, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for the next episodes. There's so much more coming, tales of apparitions, mystical beings, terrifying transformations, and urban legends unfolding right before our eyes. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one we share. Because in the end, the real mystery isn't just in the stories we hear. It's in those who listen and choose to never forget.